What are the challenges that exist right now for B2B marketers when it comes to lead generation?
And to kind of bring in another topic that you mentioned is the offline conversion stuff. The biggest problem with Performance Max is that Google is really, really good at getting what you tell it to get.
How and when you should start for your own brand on bidding side. Second is what are the brand building exercises typically B2B lead generation marketers do? Are there any specific strategies that they should be using, or based on your experience that you already had, what kind of strategies worked for you?
If you have lots of brand recognition, maybe you don't need to run some of those brand campaigns, that sort of thing. I will always say that the only way for you to have the bottom of a sales funnel is for you to actually fill the top. This is probably not the question that you need to ask your product team. This is probably a question you should ask your customer service reps or your sales reps. What do they hear customers rave about? What do they hear customers get frustrated about?
Hey, Michelle, welcome to the 10x Marketer podcast. I would love to have your quick introductions and then let's get started.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me. I am Michelle Morgan. I am a co-founder of the Paid Media Pros YouTube channel. I've been in paid advertising for almost 15 years now. It's catching up on the time where I have to say that it's more than 12. So now we're up to 15. I've got a new benchmark that I got to hit. So, worked agency side, in-house, all that stuff. So got a lot of coverage in different areas of the industry.
Awesome. So after 10 years, you probably stop counting. Like it's more than enough for
Yeah.
you to. So anything
Yeah,
above 10 is doesn't matter. And that's what
totally.
happens. So one of the things that is inspiring about you is your B2B lead generation course. So I would start by asking you, why B2B lead generation is such an important or passionate topic for you, and maybe you can give me some heads up so that we get started.
Sure. Yeah. So I have always kind of been in the lead generation space. When I first got started, I worked at a mortgage company. So that was a little bit more D2C, but still lead generation focused. And as I got into the agency world, there were lots of different businesses we were working with that were trying to generate leads. They would always end up having the same challenge that they could generate a decent amount of leads, but they weren't good quality. And then a lot of times they would end up not really knowing the full sales cycle and just seeing the number of leads they got. They'd have a CPA target, and that was about it. There wasn't anything more sophisticated after that. So kind of just ended up being the amount of companies that we worked with that had the same sort of challenges. I know a lot of people in the space really like all of the bells and whistles that come with e-commerce. Seems like every time Google releases a new tool, it's something focused on e-commerce. It's inherent to that. And lead generation is just a different beast. So I kind of hunkered down in that area. And not that I can't do e-commerce, but just really prefer the lead generation space, especially kind of the longer sales cycle.
Understood. So let's start with the first question. So typically, what are the mistakes that you see when people are planning or executing their lead gen strategy for, especially for B2B?
Yeah, so typically people will always want to focus on the bottom of the funnel right off the bat, and that's all they ever seem to want to focus on. I've said it for a long time. I think us paid marketers kind of made our own monster. We had all this cool conversion tracking when everybody else was just kind of thinking that maybe they were generating leads and they didn't have numbers to it. So we touted all the conversion tracking for a long time. And so we've got actual hard data behind the number of conversions that we're generating. But then after that, it seems like nobody's willing to do anything that's kind of mid or top of funnel. And especially for a lot of these B2B companies, you're not going to get a business to sign a $100,000, $500,000 a year contract with like a couple of searches. It just doesn't happen. You need to nurture those people through. So typically the biggest problem we see is people only focusing on the bottom of the funnel and not being willing to put any paid advertising behind anything else because it's not performance based, if you will.
Okay, so you already talked about the beast in town, and
Mhm.
both Meta and Google in general, whatever new things come up, including the PMAX campaign, the focus is
Mhm.
more on D2C side because that's the big pie of their business. What are the challenges that exist right now for B2B marketers when it comes to lead generation? And what are the strategies, including offline conversions that a lot of people are talking about, first party
Mhm.
data, which almost everyone of talk about, but half of them don't even understand what it really means, including me.
Right.
So, what are the what are the challenges for people who are struggling to generate leads in the environment like this?
Yeah, so you mentioned Performance Max, and that's one that a lot of advertisers, especially B2B lead gen folks, are getting pushed to from their Google reps. But the problem is they end up generating a lot of those leads that are just really high level, crappy leads. They're not good quality. And to kind of bring in another topic that you mentioned is the offline conversion stuff. The biggest problem with Performance Max is that Google is really, really good at getting what you tell it to get. So if you tell it, I want somebody to fill out this form, it's pretty good at getting people that are going to fill out a form. The
Mhm.
problem is that person might not even know that they're filling out a form. They might not be paying any attention, anything like that. So you've generated all these leads that are just junk. But one of the best ways to try and combat that while still using a tool like Performance Max is to use some of the offline conversions, use some of those direct kind of third-party integrations. If you can import your qualified leads from Salesforce or HubSpot or whatever, use that as a conversion action, and then tell Performance Max to optimize to qualified leads. Now we can start to actually use those tools that are Google's new things that they really want you to use, but they'll actually generate the type of leads that you need to come through. So incorporating some of the other tools they've given you is really a good way to do that.
Mhm.
Obviously, all of the first party data stuff, same sort of thing of us advertisers creating our own monster. We got away with advertising to just about anybody, just about anything without very many regulations for a really long time. And now everybody who's in government of pretty much any country, they've grown up with the technology, or they at least understand it enough that they realize we probably should have some regulations in place. So that's where the first party data considerations come in. If you own the data, then you don't have any limitations on what you can do. So
Yep.
that's where some of the mid and top of funnel stuff comes into play that will be beneficial for nurturing people later on. If you're trying to create a full funnel of marketing campaigns, which is what we always try to talk about with B2B lead gen, especially kind of those longer, bigger contract sizes, then you're going to need to know somebody at the top of the funnel, nurture them through the middle of the funnel, and then down to the bottom. And if you are relying on only cookied user remarketing lists, you're going to end up losing a lot of those people. That's just not going to match to everybody. All of the different privacy pieces are going to start blocking things. So if you utilize some maybe really light lead generation forms, like just ask for name and email at the top of the funnel, or even sometimes mid funnel, then you now own that data because the person willingly gave it to you. So then you can upload those back into the platform, target them much more specifically, assuming that you've got a good match rate and that sort of thing. But now there's no limitations on what you can do with that audience. You can target them across any platform, anywhere, because it's your first party data. So having all of that incorporated into that holistic marketing approach is going to make sure that you kind of bulletproof your data a little bit, as much as possible, at least, against any of those regulations, because the data is yours and you can do with it what you wish.
Understood. So I think you brought about something very important here. When you define the lead generation, there are concepts like MQL, SQL, and you talked
Mm-hmm.
about collecting the data at top of the funnel, just like name and email ID. There would be marketers who will just call them leads. They will say these are MQLs. Maybe sales team should
Yes.
start talking to them. So that's the one biggest challenge. I think the definition of lead or the qualified lead is always a challenge, a point of
Mm-hmm.
conflict between sales and marketing. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that's one area which needs to be addressed strongly. Even if you are generating a high number of leads, the quality is always and going to be a challenge for marketers.
Yeah, definitely. And I know a lot of marketing and sales teams, they have different objectives, they have different things. Sales always wants to be talking to somebody. Marketing always wants sales to assume that every lead they generate is good. But unless you actually break down the silos between those teams and
Mhm.
have the sales and marketing agreement about what is a good quality lead, you're not going to be only frustrating yourself and the other team, but you're also going to be frustrating your customers. Because if you just download a white paper that's a very high level topic related to something a business does, and then a salesperson is knocking down the door, constantly calling you, sending tons of emails, That's really frustrating. I'm sure that everybody's had that happen. So just put yourself in your user's shoes. If you just send in your name and email and now you can't stop being bombarded by emails, it's a really frustrating piece. You need to have some sort of additional engagement with the company before that person is actually considered a qualified lead, which is when sales should be following up with them and trying to get them either on the phone or talking to them about what more information they need, something along those lines. There needs to be some sort of minimum requirement other than just they filled out a form on the website for them to be in contact.
Understood. So I think let's talk about some practical experiences that you had with lead generation campaigns. So talk about any recent campaign that you set up, what were the challenges, and then maybe you were able to move the needle significantly with the strategies that you explained, or let's take
Mhm.
a practical roadmap here, which could be helpful for the audience.
Sure. Yeah. So, one thing that we see a decent amount, I feel like everybody has great ideas nowadays for new businesses and trying to figure out new things. The
Mm-hmm.
problem is nobody knows to search for your new business. You just
Mm-hmm.
created the business itself. They don't even know that you exist. They don't know your name. They might not even know that the solution exists. So,
Yeah.
we've had a number of startups that we've worked with that want to run search campaigns, which is
Mm-hmm.
great.
Mm-hmm.
But the problem is, again, there's not any volume for this new solution that you've created because nobody knows it exists. So we had a tool like that that we've been running recently. It's just a RevOps software platform. And basically, what we did is we used LinkedIn, trying to target people with all of the right job titles that would actually use this software,
Mm-hmm.
sent them a number of different assets, whether it was a white paper, we had some webinars, there were some
Mm-hmm.
industry reports that always did really well that we would use as kind of the top of funnel, getting somebody interested in this type of solution, letting them know this even exists.
Mm-hmm.
And then based on the engagement they would have, this company used HubSpot. So if they not only downloaded one of our assets, but then also engaged with the brand again on their
Mm-hmm.
own, we would then send some message ads to them through LinkedIn that had a special offer for them to come back, get a demo request. We ended up incentivizing the demo request, which a lot of companies do, especially on LinkedIn, because LinkedIn is not a demo request platform, unfortunately. But if you've got a good offer, you can use a message ad to get in front of them and bring them back that way. So we ended up generating a decent amount of customers that way just through utilizing multiple different stages, but also making sure that the user was qualified and interested by putting in that additional minimum requirement of not only do you have to download content, but you have to have engaged in some other way before you
Mm-hmm.
get that message ad with the incentive for the demo request.
Understood. So I think that's a good strategy and it involves LinkedIn because when it comes to LinkedIn, there are marketers who would simply avoid using LinkedIn because it's costly according to them. So
Yeah,
that's one aspect that lead gen always has a conflict with, especially when you're pitching it to new customer, you always go trade the water carefully because
definitely.
you don't know how much you can end up spending on LinkedIn and maybe don't get much output that you already expected from the campaign.
Hmm.
Let's talk about another important thing, Michelle, that is the offline convergence. There are multiple people who are talking about it. What are the stages of offline convergence and how can you really track it insightfully so that you get some real inputs for your future campaign, something that you can supply to algorithm or the AI, machine learning, whatever you want to call it, and get
Hmm.
some good quality leads for your future campaigns. So what is the right process for that? And what CRMs, according to you, support it in the best manner, including whatever you are using? And
Hmm.
maybe if you don't have a CRM, then what is the right way to supply the offline conversion back to Google?
Yeah, absolutely. So the all the different offline conversion statuses are going to follow kind of a general lead buyer flow.
Mhm.
All the names are going to be different depending on which platform you use, what your internal tools are. But basically, you start with a lead as kind of the highest level, MQLs, marketing qualified lead. Then the next level is usually a sales qualified lead, and then an opportunity, and then a customer. So that's kind of the more general flow that we end up using. I think that's also what HubSpot uses by default, which is a great platform for this. They integrate directly with a lot of different ad platforms. Marketo is another one that does this really well. Each of the different platforms has their own set of CRMs that you can integrate with. Meta has a huge list. I think LinkedIn certainly has a smaller list, but they've got a decent amount in there. So does Google as well. But for the most part, even if you don't have a direct integration, there is a software called Zapier that usually integrates across most of the different ad platforms and CRMs. So even if you don't have one of the ones that is a direct integration, you can figure out a way to do that. All you need to do is do a couple quick Google searches, and whichever set of your tech stack you've got should be able to find a solution there. The biggest challenge that we find when it comes to using these offline conversion statuses is the level to which your CRM is maintained and how clean is your data. If the sales team never goes in and moves anybody from one stage to another, it's not really usable. You need somebody going in there regularly and making sure that all of the statuses are clean. Everybody gets moved into a certain status once they actually achieve that status. That way, the data you're using is in an optimal state. But the best way that we found to use it is basically to use the offline conversion imports. So, like, let's talk about Google Ads, for example. I can create a conversion action in Google that relies on those offline conversion imports that says when somebody is in qualified lead status, call this a qualified lead conversion. So now not only do I have an audience of users, but I also have a set of conversion events that has happened based on that user. You have to match those either through somebody's hashed email, or you need to use a Google Click ID, something like that, to match the Google experience with your CRM user data. But once those match up, you'll be able to use that as a conversion action in your campaign. So I don't have to set just a conversion or just a lead form fill. I can now use a qualified lead as the optimization action, which, as I mentioned earlier, Google's really good at doing what you tell it to do. Meta is the same way. LinkedIn, not quite as much AI learning in the bidding there. I would actually caution against using almost any of their automated bidding and suggest using manual. But for Meta and Google Ads, if you've got that qualified lead action, or if your sales cycle is short enough, even if you have a SQL or an opportunity or a customer as conversion actions, they can end up optimizing toward those specific events rather than just the lead form. You've just got to make sure that whatever your sales cycle is, it's quick enough that it can actually learn and iterate on that. I'd say if you're anywhere longer than 14 to 30 days, that's probably too long. Doesn't make sense with the attribution window. You could still pass that data into the platform. It just wouldn't use it for bidding. But if you've got something with, just a couple quick days, that'd be a great turnaround for using for your smart bidding.
Understood. So now let's talk about the B2B sales cycle. You talked about it being longer. And
Mhm.
then what is the right retargeting strategy for anyone who is into this B2B lead generation?
Sure. So the biggest thing when it comes to remarketing that I find is that everybody just wants to push for a demo request or use the same calls to action that you did to get them in the buyer
Mm-hmm.
funnel in the first place. But what's actually a little bit more useful is if you augment whatever your next set of calls to action are. Either it's something that requires more engagement or gives them more information or from a different angle, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
That's a lot better as kind of a call to action. But you can create as robust or as bare of a remarketing campaign as you want, and they can still work. The biggest challenge with remarketing on that front is going to be around your audience size. Just with same privacy discussion we talked about a little bit earlier, you've got to have a minimum number of users within an audience to actually be able to target them. So even if you have a super cool, really slick remarketing series that's got 10 different touch points and all this kind of stuff, and it feels like exactly the right nurture flow, if you don't have enough users in your audience, you're not going to be able to leverage that.
Understood.
So depending on how many users you have in your audience, you might need to make it a 1 or 2 step process. And even though I'm a paid marketer. I know that's what we're talking about today. It doesn't always mean that paid is going to be the right avenue for following up. Sometimes just getting somebody in a regular email nurture sequence is going to be the best way to get them to kind of take the next steps. And then if you need to, you can use paid ads to kind of remind them, bring them back, kind of have some soft touches there. And maybe it doesn't have to be nearly as conversion focused, rather just kind of nurture and support some of the email sequences. So there's a few different strategies you can use for that.
Understood. So I think one question that I wanted to ask earlier when we were talking about offline conversions, I want to bring it back here. That is, one is how important it is to supply this data in real time. That is one part. Part two of this is that if I'm not using a CRM, or maybe I'm maintaining the data in a CRM that is not compatible with Google integrations directly, can I
Mhm.
upload the data using an Excel sheet? Will it work that same way, or the impact will be lesser or not at all?
Yeah, absolutely. So you can definitely use a Google Sheet or an Excel sheet and upload it just through a regular spreadsheet and put that information back into the platform. You need to have all the same information you would for the regular integration, whether it's the click ID or hashed user email, something like that. But you
Mm-hmm.
can definitely import those back into the platform. You can do that either for customer uploads for audience creation or offline conversion tracking. So that there's definitely a solution, a much more manual solution for that if you need to. The answer around real time versus on a more irregular cadence, either weekly or every month or something like that, that really comes down to how you want to use that data. If you just want to look at it on a quarterly basis and see how your campaigns are impacting things and you want to match up the users in your database compared to the performance that you saw on the platform, you can probably do that every month, every couple of months, something like that, and that's fine. If it's just for data comparisons, there's not really a time limit on it other than making sure if you use it for conversions, you're within the attribution window that you would have for that initial click and that Google Click ID.
Mm-hmm.
If you're trying to use it for automated bidding or something where you're leveraging the AI, the daily imports are what I would suggest. Doesn't have to be every hour. I mean, if you've got the ability to do that, that's great. But daily is usually good enough. But you would need to have that information coming back into Google pretty regularly. The way that Google optimizes is on any of the data you give it. And the more data you give it, the better it's going to do. So if you're waiting a week or 2 weeks to upload any of your audiences and then telling it to go back and find it and then try and bid based on that, you've basically starved it of that positive conversion event for 7 or 14 days. And in the meantime, it's assuming that that was a negative response. So if it doesn't see a conversion, it sees that as a miss and it's going to try and search elsewhere for the right combination of factors to serve an ad to somebody to try and hit your bidding strategy objective. So regular, at least daily occurrence is what I would say if you're going to use those events for smart bidding strategies.
Let's talk about one of the biggest beast when it comes to lead gen,
Mhm.
the branding part.
Mm.
So I have two questions which are kind of clubbed, and you can answer them one by one. The first
Mhm.
question is how and when you should start for your own brand on bidding side. Second is what are the brand building exercises typically B2B lead generation marketers do, and are there any specific strategies that they should be using, or based on your experience that you already had, what kind of strategies worked for you? Like how do you club branding plus lead generation so that you get the right kind of quality leads or people already aware of your solution? And how should marketers divide the budget? So these are two separate questions. You may want to take them one by one.
Yeah, for sure. So, um, let's start with kind of the second question around when should you be running your brand campaign or when should you be doing any sort of like the branding and how does that lead into sort of the lead generation stuff. So, um, in my mind, if you have lots of brand recognition, maybe you don't need to run some of those brand campaigns, that sort of thing. But I will always say that the only way for you to have the bottom of a sales funnel is for you to actually fill the top. So if you're not constantly trying to find new people, introduce them to your brand, try and nurture them through, you're not going to have as many people that are ready to take those conversion steps when you need them to. So personally, I think that if you can be constantly running some sort of branding and awareness campaign, even if it's relatively small, if you're targeting the right audience, those users should eventually work their way down the funnel and be in kind of your bottom funnel campaigns, searching for the solutions you have, trying to find the right products, and are a lot more interested in talking to your sales team at that point because they know what you do. They've been interacting with you for a while now and they've seen what you're doing. Outside of just regular stuff, if you're launching a new solution or you're trying to expand into a new market, something like that, anything that you're doing that's brand new that would be reaching a new set of users, that's a great time to run any sort of branding introduction ads. Same sort of thing. I wouldn't expect those people to convert right away. But if you've got a new AI tool, which everybody seems to have right now, that's a great time to start getting some of the word out about what it does, how it works, and use that as an educational piece for your target customers. Because again, if they don't know what your solution does or how it works or anything, they're never going to be interested in it because they don't understand it. So that's a great way to get the kind of the education piece in place. When it comes to when you should run brand campaigns, and I'm interpreting that as like search brand campaigns, like on your actual brand name, that sort of thing. Um, that is something that I always leave up to companies. I personally think that brand campaigns are important. I know a lot of people are like, if we don't have any competitors on our bidding on our name, why would we show up? There have been lots of different studies that show when you don't run your brand ads, the organic traffic does not pick up 100% of the traffic that you would have had overall. So that's one piece, is that I like to make sure that we've got full coverage there. But then if there are any competitors bidding on your name, or if you're just trying to make sure that you're capturing everything, running a brand campaign is a good strategy on that part. Doesn't have to be a huge portion of your budget, just because those people already know who you are. They're likely more interested in working with you than anybody else. But the budget breakdown on that really just comes down to what your goals are. Typically, we keep anywhere from, I don't know, 10 to maybe 30% of search spend allocated for brand, just based on the business's goals, how much volume they've got there, that sort of thing. But that's always going to be left up to the individual advertiser that we work with. Some people don't run brand at all. We are actively staying away from brand because they're happy with the amount of traffic they get organically. But I would still probably put most of my ad spend into the non-brand budget, just because the benefit of paid media is you can just pay to get in front of somebody.
Mhm.
And if your persona work is right and you're targeting the right people, then it's more bang for your buck probably to introduce somebody to you than it is to just capture somebody who's already looking for you.
Understood. So I think one important aspect here to understand is how much and what kind of success you had by bidding on competitor keywords, like
Mhm.
direct
Sure.
competitor keywords, if you want to talk about this.
Sure. Competitor bidding is not my favorite. It is definitely an uphill battle. You end up spending, sometimes the cost per click can be a little bit lower because it's a brand name, so that's not quite as much competition there. But there's a few things that you're fighting against. First, that person is already actively searching for your competitor brand. You need to really have a good point of view as to why they should work with you versus somebody else. If you can't beat them on price or service level or the features that you have available, there's no reason to go after that competitor. Like, you need to have some sort of enticing offer or a big differentiator as to why you're better than them. Otherwise, they're just going to click on your ads, they're going to cost you money, and they're never going to convert. So that's always a challenge. But then on the other side, when you start bidding on your competitors' terms, you invite them to start bidding on your brand terms. And a lot of times we see retaliatory bidding where somebody will just drive up the brand costs of the people that we've been working with. So in my mind, unless you are just absolutely the superior offering, brand or competitor bidding just doesn't really seem like it pans out very well for us. Some companies are willing to just say, this is a vanity metric. We know it is. We just want to steal some eyeballs here. And that's fine. If there's budget allocated for it and it's not meant to hit the same performance metrics that the other campaigns are, great. As long as everybody's on the same page that this is not going to convert the same as your brand terms or even your non-brand terms, then I'm on board. But if it's supposed to be held to the same standards, then I'm going to opt out every time.
Understood. So I think other aspect is, do you need to have a separate landing page also where you compare your brand versus your competitor, give some metrics where you are better than them? Not just
Yeah.
pricing and service level, of course, that are two important metrics. But if somebody is landing on your page for the first time, they should be able to compare you against certain things that you are superior, right? So you definitely have to invest there also.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great point. Yeah, if you can't articulate those levels where you're better than them and lay them out very clearly on the landing page, same sort of thing. I don't think it's worth it. If you're just going to send them to your general landing page and there's no mention of the competitor, it's probably not going to be worth your time. You're definitely right about that.
Understood. Now let's talk about other important aspect. I think I just mentioned landing page and it reminded me of a lot of new questions that I missed earlier. So let's focus on that right now. What should be the typical structure of landing page? I mean, there is no standard definition of what a landing page should look like, but what are the important elements that push people to conversion?
Yeah, definitely. Landing pages can look all different depending on your industry, depending on what people are used to. Different users have different user flows. Different companies have different formatting, all that sort of thing. But typically, you want to make sure that you have a header section that has some sort of related keywords, either to the search keywords you were targeting or to the types of copy you were using in your ads on any of the social platforms. I don't know if it makes as much sense as it used to have like either the dynamic keyword insertion or making sure the landing page headline keywords match exactly what's in your search campaign. Doesn't feel like that one-to-one is necessary as much as it used to be. But as long as the header section is relevant and it has a really quick hit set of information about why you should work with that company, you really just need to capture the user's interest and attention in the first like 5 to 10 seconds, or else they'll bounce off the page. So a compelling header section at first that's easily digestible is a big part of it. Making sure you have consistent calls to action throughout the page. More often than not, even though it feels really salesy, the landing pages for lead generation that I still see work the best have the lead gen form in that header section right next to the set of copy that I just talked about. Usually ends up being right at the top of the page, really easy. Or if not, there's a call to action button there that scrolls them down further down the page so that they can fill out the form. So usually having the form on the page is good. And then depending on how long your page is, having interstitials that have the call to action throughout is going to be really useful. But then after that, what are the biggest selling points as to why people work with you? Having
Mhm.
that type of information on the page is going to be the biggest factors. And whether that's, I think my biggest caution around that is this is probably not the question that you need to ask your product team. This is probably a question you should ask your customer service reps or your sales reps. What do they hear customers rave about? What do they hear customers get frustrated about? The sales reps, what do the people in the pipeline usually ask about? What type of information do they want? What do they see as the bigger parts that kind of move the conversation forward when they start talking about it? That information is what needs to be on the landing page, not necessarily what your product team thinks is like the coolest features that they have. Because they always obviously developed whatever it is, so they think it's great. So make sure that you put yourself in the customer's shoes to make sure that you're giving them the information that they need to move forward, not just you showing off.
Understood. Let's finally come to the biggest beast in the entire exercise of generating B2B leads. One is the KPIs, and second is the attribution process or
Mm,
attribution
mhm,
window. You already talked about some part of it.
mhm.
Let's start with
Yeah,
KPIs. What are the KPIs that you personally track other than just CPL? Don't talk about CPL please, because everyone is doing that. What are
sure.
the important metrics or KPIs you track for your campaigns?
Yeah, so typically we try and get away from cost per lead as much as we can. If anything, we try to look at cost per marketing qualified lead. That takes a little bit of work from the sales team, from the internal team, from the clients that we work with to actually make sure that the user is qualified. So it's a step beyond kind of that regular cost per lead you see in the platform, making sure that it's actually a qualified lead. That is usually calculated based on the down funnel conversion rates from when somebody goes from marketing qualified lead to SQL, SQL to op to customer, and based on kind of the average value of a customer, whether it's lifetime value, if they are end up being repeated customers, or just the one-time purchase, we try and reverse into what that cost per marketing qualified lead needs to be, to come up with some sort of profitable line. If you make $1,000 for every customer and you've got a 50% conversion rate, your marketing qualified lead can't be $750 because you're not going to end up being profitable for that. So you need to find some way to not only be profitable, but also hit whatever sort of return on ad spend you're trying to hit. Even though we're talking about lead generation, the fundamentals are that you want more revenue than what you had going out. And ROAS is a very e-commerce type of stat that people see in the platform all the time, but that's only because it's more immediate than lead generation. But you're going to end up using things like lifetime value, cost per acquired customer. So a CAC number is going to be actual like cost per customer, that sort of thing. Those are the metrics that we use to reverse into what the MQLs need to be. Other than that, more in funnel or sorry, in platform numbers that we look at, we still try and keep track of all of the higher level stuff like cost per click, cost per thousand impressions, any of the click through rates, any of that kind of stuff. Because as you're testing new creatives, as you're testing new audiences, as you're testing new tactics and channels, all of those are directly comparable. If somebody has a $30 CPM on LinkedIn and a $15 CPM on Meta, those are directly comparable numbers. Those are easy to compare across the board. So you're paying more to get in front of people on LinkedIn than you are on Meta. But depending on the number of people that you actually have coming through the funnel, those qualified leads, you might end up seeing that LinkedIn is actually a more profitable platform. So we try to keep those higher level numbers in the mix just so we can have some comparison as to what's more expensive, what's working. But otherwise, most of the numbers end up being kind of those very bottom of funnel revenue numbers that we're looking at.
Understood. Thank you so much, Miss Hill. I think that's a really insightful chat that we had today. I'll conclude by asking that last question, which I earlier asked. I would repeat that and then we'll close it. What are the attribution models that you prefer versus others? And what is typical attribution window that you really care about? Third is when you're doing multi-channel, which is like Meta, LinkedIn, and Google, everyone is trying to own the final piece. So how do you sort that fight?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So in terms of the attribution windows, personally, I like to look at both kind of the last click and first click models. Most CRMs have that coming in. It's either the date that a lead was created or the date that a lead moved into the next funnel stage. Those can kind of help you get a little bit of an understanding of where you played a role. If you're looking in the platforms, the data driven is about as good as it gets. Google does end up giving you kind of fractional conversions if you had a touch point here or there. So that's useful. That's kind of the best one that I've seen come through. A new attribution feature in Facebook that I actually just heard about that I'm looking into a little bit more is the incremental conversions. There is a new feature within Facebook that ideally, well, sorry, within Meta, that ideally is going to show you only the conversions that you had an incremental impact on. So it thinks that an ad specifically had an impact as opposed to anything that had any sort of impression. So that could be really impactful. It's probably going to make your conversion numbers go down, but they'll likely also be more accurate. I think most people see that Meta counts quite a lot of conversions compared to what they might see on the back end. So attribution models, kind of a mix. Ideally, you're going to find somewhere in the middle between first and last touch because neither one of them is really right. It just depends on kind of your regular conversion flow. Attribution window itself, I always try to let things run for kind of the longer time period, whether it's 28 to 30 days, because you never know how long somebody's going to take to convert. That's also why I like to look at the first versus last touch conversion actions. Having a really short window would mean a very direct rate or kind of a direct conversion action right away. But not everybody operates that way, especially not with B2B lead gen. Might take them a little while to get buy-in to say that somebody can do a demo request, all that kind of thing. So I like to leave the attribution windows long. But then that also fuels into the much longer sales cycle that we get from B2B lead gen stuff. And that's where kind of that multi-channel piece comes in. Because I talked earlier about making sure that you're remarketing people, whether it's just staying top of mind while your email does stuff, or you've already got your organic presence out there with your website. The best results come when people understand that everybody has a role to play in converting any of your customers. It's not just marketing's job, and it's not just sales's job or just email, anything like that. There might not be quite as much emphasis anymore put on like the percentage that each of these channels had on the conversion action, which I think is actually a little bit more healthy. As long as overall your entire marketing, I think it's the MER, like the marketing efficiency rate or something like that. As long as the amount of money you're spending on marketing is less than the amount of revenue you're bringing in from all of your new customers, then you're in a good spot. It's not as useful, in my opinion, to make sure that you're specifically spending only X% of your budget on paid and X% of your budget on email and all this kind of stuff. It just doesn't, it's not that finite. It's not that specific. So as long as you're being profitable overall, you might tinker here and there and shift the mix, but it's not going to come down to the fact that paid search had a 21% impact on your funnel. It just doesn't work that way anymore.
Understood. Thank you so much, Michelle. I think it was an insightful conversation, and you took a lot of my stupid plus good questions with grace. So
No,
thank you
no,
so
all good
much.
questions.
All right.
Absolutely.
And thanks everyone for listening to us so far. Do make sure you subscribe to the 10x Marketer podcast before leaving, because I keep bringing guests like Michelle and we keep talking marketing in depth. Thank you so much for joining, and thank you once again, Michelle. It was an insightful chat indeed.
Yeah, thank you.